Well, good morning, Northview. How are you doing this morning? It is good to see you. Good to be connecting up with everybody who's joining us online as well today. Hey, guys, if you have a Bible with you or Bible app on your phone, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, we're going to wrap up our series today that's called Searching for Something. This is the series finale, right? It's like you're waiting for it. You're excited about it. How many of you remember and waited for and watched the season finale of Friends? Can I just kind of know who my people are out here? Got a few of you that did. Okay, let's do another one. Seinfeld. Anybody remember the finale of it? We got a few. Let me go backwards in time a little bit. This is the highest viewed, most highly viewed season finale, series finale in the history of network television. How many of you watched the MASH finale? You remember that? Yeah. Some of you guys under 30, you're like, MASH what? Like potatoes? No. Just ask your parents or your grandparents. It was like Yellowstone for them, but a little bit different. But man, it was a big deal. And those last episodes often of these series, Lost or whatever it is that you're watching, they often kind of set the whole journey in a certain perspective. Sometimes that's why they get frustrating reviews from people because of the way they finish or the interpretive slant that happens in that very final episode. And they often also kind of walk you through the journey a little bit just to remind you what we've been through and the journey that we've been on as you come into that final episode where we're going to land this plane, so to say. And that's kind of what we're doing here when we get to chapter 12 in Ecclesiastes. We've been on a journey. If you're just joining us, we've been journeying through this Old Testament book that was written by either King Solomon or somebody like King Solomon who had a lot of power, had a lot of riches, had a lot of influence, a lot of wisdom, a lot of things at his disposal to be able to ask some of the deeper questions in life. What is life about? Where do we find meaning? Where do we find purpose? And he was able to, because of his position and his resources, really chase these roads down about as far as you can chase them to be able to say, is this where someone finds meaning or purpose? Is it through their work? Is it finding their identity in work? Is it through pleasure? Is it through money? Is it through, and he went down all these different roads. Each time kind of coming to a place where he was left saying, no, it's not quite that, but I've still got this ache. I've still got this yearning to try to figure out, but then what is it? And so we come to chapter 12 where he finally is going to give us the answer to the question that he's taken 12 chapters to kind of wrestle with. What is the meaning of life? What do we boil all of life down to? Where do we find the most satisfaction in life? But before we get to that summary or conclusion verse, I want to read one verse in front of that verse because I think it really paints an interesting metaphor for this whole journey that we've been on. It's a journey that creates some pain. All growth does. When you're growing, usually there's pain points. My kids are all in various forms of athletics. They're doing athletic training right now, and so they come home after these workouts, and they're always sore. That's the constant refrain in my house. Oh, I'm so sore. I'm so sore. Well, it's because they're working really hard, and so I love to, as dad, just to exercise the power of a little thumb, like in the side of a thigh or the small of a back. I mean, I can just put these guys in tears sometimes with just the gentlest of touch because they're really pushing themselves hard to try to grow. So the pain is worth it because they know we're getting somewhere. We know we're working hard and getting somewhere. That's a little bit about the process that we see in Ecclesiastes verse 11 of chapter 12, where just before giving his summary of what life is all about, he says this: the words of the wise are like goads. Their collected sayings like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd. The words of the wise, he says, are like goads. What is a goad? That's a strange term. Let me kind of take you back a long way back to a different world, different culture, different space, but you'll connect really quick with this. Sometimes when you you have animal power and you're trying to move the animal forward without letting it go backwards, you would prod it in a certain way to try to make sure that it went the direction that you wanted it to go. Sometimes you would use something that's mobile, like almost think like a baseball bat that kind of was maybe sharpened to a bit of a point where you could poke and prod them in the direction direction you want. Or sometimes this would be used on like plows where oxen were inclined to want to quit moving forward and maybe rock back. There would be a series of these. Again, think like a baseball bat with a pointy end, where if the oxen was to stop moving forward and rock back, they would get poked in the legs by these goads. And I don't know what you do when you get poked in the back of the leg with pointy baseball bats, but oxen typically go, yo, that hurts, I'm going forward, not backwards, right? And then they would go forward for a while, and then they would be tired of doing what you were telling them to do, and they would stop and maybe want to go backwards again, and they would get poked, and it would push them forward. The writer of Ecclesiastes says, wisdom is like goads. They push you forward to the right direction, to the right life. And that's really what we've been pursuing over these last several weeks, is to find the right life, the best life. And in some ways, I guess you could say the book of Ecclesiastes is like God's cattle prod. It's just pushing us a little bit further down the road, making sure that we don't rock back in the wrong direction. Now, all that being said, let's get to verse 13. Because here's where the summary of the whole book comes in. He says, now that all has been heard, here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. Fear God, keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of mankind. He says, everything that I need to tell you, everything that makes life make sense, starts with fearing God. Over and over and over again, the Bible speaks to this idea of fearing God in a healthy way. Over 300 references where people either were told to or did fear God. When they got close to him, when he came near, when they became aware of who he really was in light of who they were overcome by fear. Adam was hiding in the garden after eating of the forbidden fruit. God says, Adam, where are you? He's hiding. He's covering himself. And he said, I was afraid. That's why I'm hiding. Moses, when he was looking at a bush that was on fire but not being consumed, and talking to him, he was afraid. Moses, later becoming the leader of Israel, God is at Mount Sinai, and he's thundering, and it's lightning, and it's awesome, and God is near, and the people are scared to death to go close to God, and they basically tell Moses, you go up there and talk to God. Just get us the memo. We are too scared of him to go up there. Job said, he felt scared in God's presence. Isaiah saw a vision of God in Isaiah chapter 6, and it floored him. And he said, woe to me, I'm a dead man. When the disciples were with Jesus and he was transfigured, just transformed, clothes, everything just brightly shining around him, Peter, James, and John just fell on the ground in fear. In each of these stories, that fear is told as appropriate. Not inappropriate, but appropriate. Because they've come close to a holy, almighty, all-powerful God. Fear is an important part of understanding who God is. In fact, Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10 says this way, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. This is one of the things that we, Jamie and I, have tried to impress upon our kids. This really is the foundational aspect of all other pieces of biblical wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. When you get a chance to get a glimpse of who he is in light of who you are, it should cause you to tremble. And if you don't have that experience and you don't have that awareness, then sometimes what you have to do is step back and ask the question, why? And what am I missing? What am I not seeing? What am I not seeing? Author by the name of Mark Buchanan wrote a book years ago called Your God is Too Safe. And I've always remembered that title because in his book, he tries to paint the picture that the Bible paints over and over and over again of this grand, incredible, all-powerful God. And our right response should start with healthy fear. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but what does it mean to fear the Lord? What does it mean to fear the Lord? Well, it means, for one, to stand in awe of his majesty, to stand in awe of who he is, to step back and appreciate all the strength, all the power, all the creativity, all the control that resides in him, that resides in nothing or no one else. One of my favorite stories of this happening is in the New Testament, when the disciples were in a boat with Jesus, and he's preached and teached and healed, and he's whooped, so he's asleep. And big storm comes up, and it's enough that it gets to a really, really scary spot where everybody in the boat is now fearful for their life. And they have to wake Jesus up. And they wake him up to be like, dude, do something, right? And he does to the storm what you and I would do to an annoyance from our child. You get to a point where you listen to it in the background, and the crying or the fussing or the fighting or whatever. And part of like life in a home with kids is you just have to tolerate it. Like you can't stop it every second, every moment when it comes up, or you'd never stop saying stop it, right? But you all know what I'm talking about. It gets to a point where it's like, this is done. And I don't know how you say it. I don't know if you point. I don't know if you snap. I don't know what words you use. But it's some version of this. Knock it off. And when you get to knock it off in my house, you know I'm done with this. Whatever this is, whether it's you guys fighting, yelling, back talking, not cleaning your room, I don't care. Knock it off. Jesus gives the storm a knock it off. And it shuts down. Like you wish your kids would when you say it. It just stops in a moment. And the disciples in the boat who just watched this whole thing happen, who went from, we were afraid we were going to die, to we asked you to do something, to you told it to stop, and it stopped on command. It says, and I'll just give you the Greek word because it's one of my favorite ones. It says, they thaumazoed. It's an awesome word, isn't it? Thaumazo. It means they marveled. They marveled. Because they understood no one else has this power. No one else has this power. Exodus chapter 15, verse 11 says, who among the gods is like you, Lord? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glory, working wonders? Who can do what you can do? Part of fearing God is standing in awe of him. I don't know when or how you are brought to a place of awe with God, but I'll tell you one of the times that I will never forget. It's the first time I saw the ocean. I didn't grow up going to the ocean. My kids are spoiled. They've been to the ocean a half dozen times probably. But we didn't do that when I grew up. We went to Six Flags for vacation. We rode Thunder River. In the log flume, right? That was getting wet. That was the beach for us. So I'm 19 years old, and I'm in San Diego, California. And I saw the Pacific Ocean. And I was with a group of guys, and we were out there to have some fun. But like, I just had a moment, just me and God, because I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, I'd never seen it. My mind was trying to wrap itself around the majesty that I was seeing as the sun was setting in San Diego. The ocean waves lapping in, water as far as you can see. It was breathtaking. I mean, it was just absolutely awe-inspiring. And I stood there on the sands of that beach, just saying like Job did, who am I? Who am I? Wow. Sometimes we got to get out of the humdrum and the busyness and the just normalcy of life to step back and look out the window and recognize how abnormal and crazy it is that we're alive in this world, in bodies that we embody, with all the physiology and biology that's going on right now inside of us, in a world that's on the perfect tilt with the perfect climates and the perfect seasons. I mean, it's absolutely nuts, guys. And we just live life like it's common. We are in a world that none of us have the power to create, build, or sustain, and every minute of it is all being held. Every minute of it is all being held by Creator God. And part of fearing God is knowing, I better step back and appreciate this for a second. I better get my life in the right posture, in line with where has this come from? And who am I in light of everything that I'm seeing? And we could look out at that ocean. You know, in the ocean, they use sonar to try to measure things in water and measure how deep. And they send these sound waves down, and they try to bounce them off the bottom. And they figure out how long it takes to get to the bottom and all this, I don't know, science stuff. And they figure out how deep it is. We can go out into the ocean of God's power, His strength, His creativity, His judgment, His righteousness, His holiness, whatever. We will never find the bottom, guys. We can send that wave down and we will never find it. And part of fearing God is knowing that and standing in awe of that. Standing in awe of that. Secondly, fearing God means we've got to revere His authority. To fear God is to revere, to place His authority as final over all. His word is the final word. No other word matters on any subject. On any subject. We love to interview people who are the leading experts. Any crisis, any situation, anything that happens in life. And you'll find an expert voice speaking into it, right? On TV, we're going to interview who's the doctor, who's the lawyer, who's the expert historian, who's the leading voice on this issue. To fear God is to appreciate the fact that He is, and to respect the fact that He is the final authority on all issues, all matters. End of argument. End of story. He is the law. And when I was 16, I had my license, and my parents let me drive a couple hours away to my hometown. We'd moved when I was in 8th grade. And so my best friends in the world were 2 hours away. It's hard to adjust in a new town. We made friends, but I mean, still, your lifelong best friends are your lifelong friends. So I made a trip for the weekend to go up and visit them. And my parents didn't go. It was just me and my brother went with me, my younger brother. And so it was kind of my first big trip out, driving by myself. And we went there. We spent the weekend there. We're coming back on Sunday. We went to church with everybody, had fun, and then came home on Sunday afternoon. And we had crossed the river. My hometown is right where Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri all come together. So we cross over into Missouri shortly into the trip. We're on a 2-lane highway. And it's Sunday afternoon, and I am stuck behind a blue hair that's driving like 50 miles an hour on this 2-lane road. And I mean, I'm getting impatient. It was the first of what's become decades of frustration over slow drivers. Okay. And so you're waiting and waiting and waiting to try to get a chance to pass. And finally, a big, long straightaway comes, and I'm like, see ya, whoop, and just zip out past her, get back in the lane. Well, wouldn't you know it, the first car coming the opposite direction was Missouri State Highway Patrol. And while I had been well below the speed limit for miles and miles and miles behind the blue hair, I was well above it when I passed. He didn't care about my story. He pulled me over, and in my mind, I'm scared to death because I'm scared of my dad, for one. I'm like, how is this going to work? Am I ever going to drive again? Do I tell him? Do I not tell him? All that. Officer comes to the door, roll down the window. I kind of had my heart's racing. I kind of had an idea of what I was going to say. And it all just went out the window. And it was just, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. Okay, I'm sorry, yes, sir, here you go. I mean, it was because why? Because He's the authority. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter my story. It doesn't matter my excuse. It does not matter. He's the law. I broke it. He says you're judged for it. So I've got my ticket. I'm driving the rest of the way home. I'm just trying to rehearse in my head, how is this going to go? How am I going to have this conversation? How am I going to have this conversation? An hour later, it's a 2-hour drive, about an hour later, I'm now at a 4-lane part of the highway, a grassy median in between, and about a half-mile, quarter-mile up in front of me. Not enough that I was going to have any kind of collision or anything like that, but a van coming the opposite direction just takes a 45-degree through the median, bounces up over it, flips onto its passenger side, and skids right across the highway right in front of me. Well, I quickly slow down, pull off. So did the car behind me. And over the course of the next few minutes, we ended up getting up on top of the van, opening up the driver's door, and pulling people out through the driver door as it laid on its passenger side. Everybody was okay, mild bumps and bruises. But as soon as that happens, you have this sense of like, well, we better call for help. We better connect. And my dad had sent us on that trip with a primitive version of a cell phone. And some of you guys remember when cell phones were like emergency use only, because they were stupid expensive to use, especially when you were roaming, which is ironic because when are you ever going to really probably need the phone? When you're in the middle, but somewhere between Iowa and Missouri. That's when you would need to make a call. So I knew that your life better be almost, gone to use that phone. But I figured this was a case where I better accept those roaming charges and just deal with Dad later. So I made that call. 911. And within minutes, the same group of people, not the same officer, but the same group of people, the Missouri State Highway Patrol, are on the scene. The last time they were here to judge, you broke the law. This time, they came to save, to rescue, to make whole. That's exactly the same thing it is with God. He is the authority. And part of fearing God is to recognize him as both authorities, that he has the power because he is the law to condemn and to judge when we break his laws. But he has also the authority that can respond and save and make whole. The story that you see in the New Testament after Jesus is that we have 2 ways of relating to God. 2 ways. One's law, one's grace. The first one goes like this, okay? It's if you keep the commandments, you escape the penalty. If you break the commandments, you suffer the penalty. We get it. We understand law. That's one way you can relate to God. If you can keep every commandment, you're good. You'll escape all the penalties. What's the problem? We can't. We break the commandments. All of us do. So we should suffer the penalty. Here's the second way that because of Jesus, you can relate to God. This one goes like this. This is grace. You can keep the commandment and suffer the penalty. You can break the commandment and escape the penalty. Let me make this one make sense. Jesus kept the commandments, but he suffered the penalty. We broke the commandments, but we escaped the penalty because he already took it for us. Which way do you want to relate to God? This is the choice that you and I have, but his authority is unquestioned in the whole process. He is the authority. He can judge, but he has come in his judge to also be just, and he's made sure that there's a way for you and I to still be able to relate to him. That's why he sent his son Jesus. That's why Jesus came to this earth. So we step back in awe of his majesty, in reverence of his authority. And then when we see this love piece where he would extend grace to us even when we reject him, it leaves us no other place but to just worship him for his supremacy. Because not only is he holding everything together, not only is he making sure that you and I are staying alive, he's providing a way that even in our brokenness, that you and I have a way to relate to him. The only proper response is worship. Is worship. It's submission. It's to be able to say, you're God and I'm not. You have power that I don't have. It's a proper fear. It's to say, you're creator. You're above all. It's you hold the world together, not me. Psalm 33, verse 8 says it this way, let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the people of the world revere him. For he spoke and it came to be. He commanded and it stood firm. The basis of that praise and worship that God deserves is this is his show. He's the creator. He made the whole thing. He made the world. He made us. He has made it all. He is above us. So he, not me, holds everything together. And when we appreciate that, we respond in worship to that. We begin to see that God's priority in our life sets the tone for all other things. Now, admittedly, this never really gets us to a place of great comfort, like where everything is just soft and sweet and bubblegum and cotton candy, because there is this holy, wild, powerful, incredible side of God that cannot be tamed and frankly is too tamed in your world. I'm reminded of the incredible children's book written by C.S. Lewis decades ago, Chronicles of Narnia. And in the first one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, there's this moment where the kids, and you remember the little kids, you've got Peter and Susan and Edmund and Lucy, and they go through the wardrobe, and it's like a portal into another world. And they find themselves in the middle of winter. And the two big characters in this winter story are the White Witch, who's cast a spell over the whole land. And it seems like she's winning, and it's going to go, the whole world is collapsing. But there's this rumor of the king who's represented. He's a lion. His name is Aslan. And these kids are trying to make sense of this world that they're in, experiencing its harshness and trying to understand what's really going on. And they find themselves in a conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Beaver. It's represented in the movie version of this as well a little bit. Mr. and Mrs. Beaver are they're followers of Aslan. Even though most of the rest of the world has turned, they're true followers of Aslan. And so they provide great insight and information to these kids who are trying to figure out what's this world and what's this life all about. So the kids are faced with these stark realities of bleakness and coldness and winter, and they're trying to understand. They're being warmed by the idea that there's someone out there who could set this straight. There's someone out there who could make this right. And so Lucy and Susan's thoughts start to go to what is he like? What is Aslan like? And they're peppering Mr. and Mrs. Beaver with these questions about what Aslan is like. And they're hoping to find some great comfort in knowing that he's someone who can be safe for them. And so this dialogue goes on like this between them. They say this, Lucy does, is he, Aslan, is he a man? Aslan, a man? Said Mr. Beaver sternly. Certainly not. I tell you, he's the king of the wood and son of the great emperor beyond the sea. Don't you know who's the king of the beasts? Aslan is a lion. He's a lion. He's the great lion. Ooh, said Susan. I thought he was a man. Is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous about meeting a lion. Well, that you will, dearie. And no mistake, said Mrs. Beaver. If there's anyone who can appear before Aslan without their knees knocking, they're either braver than most or else just silly. Then he isn't safe, says Lucy. Safe, says Mr. Beaver. Don't you hear what Mrs. Beaver tells you? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you. It's one of my favorite lines in the whole book. Is he safe? Of course he's not safe, but he's good. He's the king. His authority is the final authority. He is the creator and the sustainer. He is above all things. Is he safe? No. The safest thing for you and I to do is not play it safe with God. It's to respond fully and totally to everything that he has for you. The fullness of what he has. There's a picture of this that's so vivid for me. It comes out of Acts chapter 26. It's Saul, who later becomes Paul, recounting his conversion experience. It's told a few times in the book, but in chapter 26, he says he gets knocked down by this bright light. He's on the Damascus road. He's going to actually persecute Christians. He's knocked down on this road. Bright light shines from heaven. And an audible voice from Jesus says to him, Saul, Saul, why do you kick against the goads? It's the exact same word and the exact same metaphor that's in Ecclesiastes 12. The words of the wise are like goads. They're propelling you forward to the life that God would have you be. God stopped Saul in his tracks and said, you are on the wrong road. Why are you kicking against? Why are you trying to go back against God's fullest and best for your life? In that moment, Saul understood God's fullest and best for his life. The embodiment of fearing God, keeping the commandments, and living in that tension of a holy God who's to be respected and feared, but also who loves and will do everything he can to be made right in relationship with his children. He recognized in that moment that the fullness of all of that was to be found in Jesus. That Jesus was the embodiment of wisdom. He was the one who came to make our shortcomings with the law wiped clean. And he was the one who invites us every day to live with him and for him. Jesus said this more than anything else. Come follow me, and you'll find the life that you've always wanted. This is how he actually would say it over and over and over again. He would say it, if you deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow me. You'll try to find your life. He said, you try to save your life and you'll lose it. But if you will lose your life to me, you will find your life. The place of wholeness that you and I are seeking is found in Christ. If you've been left empty and wanting from all the other pursuits in life, today is an opportunity for you, like Saul 2,000 years ago, to stop kicking against the goads and say, God, I want what you have for me. And if that's your son Jesus, I want that. I want to receive him as my Lord and Savior. I want to experience forgiveness. I want to be baptized. I want to identify with him. I want to be one of his followers, not playing it safe, all in. All in. If that's you, I want to invite you to respond. Whether you do that in just a moment as we sing, I'll be standing at the back by the Connect corner, or whether you want to respond via the code on the screen. Take that step to identify and say, yes, yes, I want to be a Jesus follower. I want more than anything for my life to be reflected by my worship to him. Maybe for you, this is a moment of rekindling a fire. Maybe you've not been very awe-inspired lately. It's not because God's not awesome or awe-inspiring. It's just that you've become numb to it. Maybe because you've been chasing other things, convinced that's going to make you happy or fulfilled. It's not. It's not. So maybe today is a moment to rekindle that fire and to be renewed and restored again. So in this moment, will you take your next step of faith? I'm going to ask you to stand and join me in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, God, we come to you now looking at this testimony that you have been writing for thousands of years, speaking to us your truth for our lives, the truth about our lives. And God, we've been reminded today that all truth is your truth, but the foundational truth that we need to embrace is that you are God and we are not. So we stand back, and in this moment we give you the worship you deserve, and we thank you for the love that you've shown us. We thank you for the opportunity that we have to be called your children, to know you, and to be put in relationship with you. We just stand in awe of that right now, God. May this worship be a reflection of our heart as we give you praise and honor today. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.